Welcome to another episode of Converge. I've got a fun group today from the UK's Algebra with an interesting spelling of Algbra. They are a UK-based fintech startup. They're focused on ethical finance and combating financial exclusion. We've got Anton, Tom, and Martin with us. Welcome to the show, guys. Great to have you all, and thanks for taking a chunk of your afternoon happy hour to spend with me here. Before we jump into a discussion of Algebra and your business and the space that you're active in, can you give us a little brief intro on yourself, your background, and what you do at Algebra and sort of what brought you to where you are today? Why don't we start with Anton?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Alexa. Thanks for having us. I'm Anton, VP of Engineering at Algebra. I joined as one of the founding engineering team members 3.5 years ago now, I think. And my career has always been in software engineering, with the last decade or so focused in banking and fintech. And so, at Algebra, I lead the engineering efforts alongside our CTO, and to ensure our tech is scalable and we can offer people ethical finance solutions. It's been a good journey so far.
Cool. How about you, Martin?
Yeah, like Anton, I also joined as part of the founding team. About 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago, I joined in an interdepartmental role, which was everything but tech. So Anton's and my skill sets, I think, are very different. I think Anton is much more skilled than I am. Nonetheless, also enjoying my time at Algebra. So interdepartmental role, but focusing on the ESG impact side of stuff. So built that up. And now from a B2B perspective, still very much involved with those sorts of projects like Shoal, which I look forward to touching on throughout this episode. And other than that, my title is Impact and Partnerships Managers. So I guess I also do quite a lot on the partnership side.
Awesome. How about you, Tom?
Thanks, Alex. So I'm Tom. I am the founder of Shoal, which is a new ethical and sustainability-focused savings platform, which we're about to launch in the UK. My background is originally law, but then I spent a decade working for a very big British bank called Standard Chartered. I left that a couple of years ago to focus on the building of Shoal full-time, which I'm now partnered with Algebra on to get it finally ready, up to scratch and out to market.
Awesome. Well, good to have you all. And this is obviously a interesting discussion, an interesting company with a real special sort of niche in the fintech space. So from what I understand, you have a focus on eliminating social and financial exclusion around the globe, which includes efforts towards Sharia compliance and B Corporation status. So Algebra is really not your typical fintech startup. So can you give me an overview of the business and what you're trying to achieve? Maybe, Tom, if you want to take a stab at that.
I think, if I may, actually, Alex, I'll defer to Martin on that one.
Oh, sure.
The strongest insights. I can talk about the experience of working with Algebra, but I think for that founding member perception of what they're trying to achieve, he's probably the best.
Great. Yeah, I'm happy to take it. So, I mean, I think fundamentally, and this aligns with Shoal, is that we think financial services just really plays a crucial part in shaping the world that we live in. And in a way, you can almost think about financial services like a pharmacon in the ancient Greek term of the word, which is essentially both poison and medicine simultaneously. And I think we very much want to fall into the medicine camp. So that's the reason why we're B Corp, why we're Sharia compliant and have a focus on ethical finance more broadly and the impact side of things, because we think that financial services has this huge potential to play a role in creating a more equitable, empowered, and sustainable society for everyone. And essentially, the way that we do this is a two-pronged approach. So on the one hand, you've got the B2C businesses, including the Algebra app. And then the other one is the B2B side, which is through Algebra Labs, which is our fintech as a service solution. And I think that's something we'd like to deep dive in today. And that's where the partnership with Shoal stems from. And ultimately, through the FAST proposition, which I think is something that we're pioneering. Anton, correct me if I'm wrong. That's my understanding of it. But through it, we essentially help build, launch, and also run digital financial products. So whether that's for a supermarket that wants a rewards card or a bank that wants to digitize its entire operations, that's something that we can do. And that's not dissimilar to what we're doing with Shoal right now. So I think that would be a good use case for that.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So there's effectively two strands of what you do. There's fintech as a service that you provide to fintechs and other third parties, and then your own ethical finance products that you provide direct to consumers. So how do you balance these two sides of the business and what's the relationship between them? For example, does Algebra Labs work help fund the consumer services? What's the relationship there?
Yeah, I can take that one. From a tech point of view, you can say like both Algebra and now Shoal, we've built using the Algebra Labs platform, which is our fintech as a service or our FaaS platform. These are not just two fully fledged products in their own right, but they also serve as real demonstrations of how our platform operates successfully. And we show potential partners that Algebra Labs can handle everything you'd expect from a traditional BaaS provider. Like we think like maybe a BaaS provider would give you things like core banking, ledgers, accounts, maybe cards, but like a fintech as a service solution will give you something more comprehensive and everything you need to launch a digital offering. Things like you'd also include onboarding, KYC, regulatory reporting, transaction monitoring, and customer operations and some back office tooling. And so by running our own products on the same platform we offer to others, this is how we prove it works. And we eat our own cooking.
Yeah, exactly. I love that analogy too. Like we taste the food we make before shipping it, right? So then you have this continuous iteration process where we have real world feedback from our own operations. And in a way, what I really like with how things are set up is that a lot of our customer support teams, AML teams, they act as pretty much product managers as well, don't they, Anton? Because they are continuously interacting with the outside world with the products that we've built. So then they will say, hey guys, this has crashed, or we think this is a way that we can improve this. So you've got this really nice thing where you are continuously iterating on something which we can then provide to our B2B clients.
And
like Shoal, for example. Yeah.
As I was going to say, from a client perspective, that was really important to me. I have to say, at the risk of stretching an analogy to breaking point or possibly beyond, Alex, Algebra eat their own cooking in the sense that they build B2B. They also run successful B2C. As a potential B2B client, I could see both. I could see what they were capable of building, so I could get a good look at the food before I decided whether or not to order. And I think the way that they've done it, the team that they've put together is really, really valuable and something quite new. I've been working on Shoal since 2020 from within a major financial institution. And you might wonder why something as simple as sustainable fixed term savings has taken as long as it has to pull together. And the main problem that I ran into was that when you want to build an app, as Anton says, you have to assemble a whole array of different vendors to provide the various components. You need someone to provide the underlying accounts, traditional BaaS. You need somebody to design the back end, the front end. You've got your marketing, you've got your onboarding. All of that requires an RFP. And then your prize at the end of it is more work as you get them all to work together and not hide behind one another and deliver a product that makes sense, that is kind of unified in look and feel. Whereas with Algebra, what you get is one team, one contract. It's much easier, faster, and cheaper, candidly, to do that than it has been under the traditional model.
Yeah, so you're also focused on combating financial exclusion and serving communities that are unbanked or underbanked. How big is that problem if we're talking specifically about the UK and the other markets that you're currently active in or plan to be active in soon? Do you think there's a potential market beyond certain communities that you focus on currently who want to ensure their money is invested ethically? And first speak to sort of the local, regional sort of UK problem, and then how big you see this globally.
Sure. Yes, I think the distinction between unbanked and financially overlooked or underbanked is a really important one. I was about to use the crude example I've used in the past, but I won't use it again. But it's basically just because you have access to something doesn't make it meaningful, right? So there's a big distinction there. It's only meaningful if it really actually caters towards your needs. So there is the unbanked who basically just don't have the infrastructure around them that enables them to even have access. Whereas the underserved or the overlooked or the underbanked, however you might want to refer to them as, that's essentially different groups who do not feel like their needs are met by standardized solutions. And that market is absolutely massive. And for some, it's more serious than others, right? If you've got a disability, you might have access to a bank account, but it actually doesn't really work for you because it doesn't have all the disability requirements that you might that you might need. Then you also have things like faith-based requirements, which is a demographic we're after, the Muslim demographic. So that's huge. I mean, there's 2 billion Muslims globally. And of the 1.4 billion unbanked, 800 million of those are also Muslim. And so you see this intersection there. And then, of course, there's the sustainability aspect. And what you actually find is that there's a lot of interplay between these, and the principles of, say, Sharia finance will marry so well with the principles of ESG finance. And then ESG obviously marries well with disability related matters. So it's really about, in a way, by building something that is truly comprehensively ethical and inclusive, you begin to build something that is hyper personalized for everyone, because you begin being able to meet these diverse needs. And look, I mean, we have it in every industry. I often use the example: you go into a supermarket and you want your yogurt, you have hundreds of choices to choose from, any combination of dairy or soy or strawberry or banana or low fat or full fat or whatever, you name it. But then when it comes to something so crucial as financial services, you're stuck with these standardized solutions, often aimed at an assumed homogenous population, which looks probably more like us on this call than what the majority of the world actually looks like.
That's interesting. I mean, not everything should be 2% milk in the bank either. So I totally know what you mean in that analogy.
Exactly.
Let's talk about an investment. Earlier this year, I understand that Standard Chartered's venture capital and fintech investment arm, SC Ventures, made a strategic investment in Algebra. And as part of the agreement, Shoal, which you spoke of, which is SC Ventures' sustainable finance platform, is partnering with Algebra. The amount wasn't disclosed, but how significant is the investment for Algebra? I understand to this date, you've been funded by pretty high-profile angel investors. So what will this new funding mean for your business in its next stage of growth?
Sure. I'm happy to take it if you guys like. So, and then I mean, you guys jump in and maybe you have different perspectives on this, but I think for us, it's also strategically very important. It's not just about the money here, but really for us, Standard Chartered is a really, really good match. One, I think it's just that we don't look at banks as competitors. They're very much our friends and people that we want to, or organizations we want to work with as much as possible, which is not always the case in the fintech industry. Generally, we think we're much stronger together when fintechs work with these big banks, as we have our particular strengths that we can leverage. And actually, maybe Tom, you can touch on that as well, maybe now in a little bit around how that has been the case with Shoal, for example.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think for Algebra more broadly, I think the remarks you've made are absolutely to the point. The investment from Standard Chartered is much less about the dollar amount. I think Algebra are very fortunate in the backers they already have. It's much more about the strategic reach that it brings. I mean, Standard Chartered are a 170-year-old British trade bank in 60 geographies. Obvious synergies in terms of what we're trying to achieve with Shoal and the mission there. But also, I think that reach, the relationship with regulators, with governments, with local corporates, and that market understanding means that Shoal is just the first partnership that we'll embark on. There's much, much more that we can do later on.
Yeah, and I think also that emerging markets focus is a big one. We're both UK one's 170 years old, we're 4 years old or something like that, and since incorporation, but we're both London headquartered, but very much with the eyes on emerging developing economies. And then with regards to something like Shoal, it's very difficult to build something like that when you don't have a huge asset base. And this sustainable finance portfolio from Standard Chartered is another way in which small fintechs can leverage these massive portfolios that these banks have been creating over centuries in some cases, such as with Standard Chartered. And again, there's a values aligned piece. They were recently ranked number 1 in climate change adaptation among the big banks. So that was another values alignment piece that worked really well with us. And together, the emerging markets focus with the climate change piece, with the sustainability piece, is something that's very dear to us, which is this just transition narrative around, fine, we realize that we have to become more sustainable, but that's easier said than done for some economies. So it's really important that we provide that green financing where it's most needed, which are developing economies. So I think that was a really nice overlap too.
And I think you're being quite modest there, Martin, and focusing on the things SCB or Stanchart have that Algebra perhaps don't. The opposite of that is equally true. There's plenty that Algebra bring to this table that Standard Chartered could do. You know, they're not in UK retail and they don't want to be. Whereas by working with Algebra, they haven't just built an app that works. We've got the KYC, we've got the onboarding, we've got the compliance support. So we can do that in a very light touch, very quick, but still extremely strong, robust way. So we can remain within the risk appetite of a big bank, but build and launch a product candidly for probably less than a big bank would spend on consultancy fees thinking about whether or not to do it.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask, sort of, it sounds like the values are there, the values are aligned between SC Ventures and Algebra. It makes a lot of sense that Shoal would be a natural fit in terms of integration. And it sounds like it will help augment, but also shape services that they offer and that you offer. I don't know if there's anything you didn't touch on in terms of how the integration will, what the integration will mean in terms of services you offer beyond what you had imagined before this partnership. Is there sort of a box you're thinking outside of now that you have Standard Chartered as sort of part of the team and the roadmap from Shoal, or is it really just a natural fit to the roadmap you had prior to the integration?
Anton, do you have thoughts on that, or shall I go?
You started off, Tom.
So I think when I look at what we've built with Shoal within the sort of the orbit of Algebra as well, the Shoal savings proposition sits really neatly and nicely beside the Algebra card proposition. They're both ethical, they're both sustainable, they're both values driven. Both companies are B corporations, for example, and it's just a nice balance of the two. And to potential B2B customers for Algebra, it shows that they can build both. So I think that's really helpful. But looking ahead, I guess when you've got both institutions involved, you've got Algebra's tech and expertise that do let us build out a much more ambitious roadmap. We've started with savings because we know it's something that people want, they need, it's easy to understand, and we can do something quite differentiated by supporting Standard Chartered sustainable finance portfolio. But Algebra have the tech and the experience and the skills to allow us to go beyond that and build Shoal out into a fuller service financial services marketplace with sustainability at its core. So we can look at green loans, we can look at green mortgages, potentially pensions. We now know that we can build that roadmap out in the UK with the right partner. And between Algebra and Stanchart, we can also look overseas as well, because again, we've got that ready-made introduction, that ready-made credibility in all those markets in which Standard Chartered operate. And as good luck would have it, it is, as design would also have it, those markets are the ones that Algebra are focused on because they're majority Muslim markets across Asia, across Africa and the Middle East.
Got it. So something that I've found, interesting as an observer here in the U.S. where I reside, we've seen some activist investors sort of showing some blowback or, speaking out against DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the U.S. And there's been some debate subsequently as to how ESG funds perform versus the market generally. I'm wondering, do you have any concerns that the market for ethical investing could be relatively small or may even shrink? Or do you see this as a market that will only grow over time? What's your unique view on this? And how do you view those sort of alternative views coming from other parts of the world?
It's a great question. I think for me, it's very much the latter of the two. I think the market is here. I think it will grow. I think it will eventually go from being seen as the green ESG market to just the industry standard. I think over time, that will just become the norm and the strongest offerings will be the greener, the more sustainable options. What I think we've seen in terms of backlash is partially or largely justified, but I think it's a response to people in that space overstating what they're achieving and then engendering a certain cynicism. I think if the products aren't good enough, you will see a backlash. And that has taken the form of people claiming to achieve more than they have. I think so that if the impact isn't there or isn't sufficiently strong, that is a problem and consumers will react. I also think if the products themselves aren't strong enough on the financial side, people will either not take them up or they'll begin to resent that over time. So I think the key to solidifying, to strengthening this market is making sure that A, the claims that are made about the various products are true, verifiable, sufficiently robust, and that nobody's being misled. You've got to get rid of that anxiety around greenwashing. But equally, you've got to tackle and eliminate the perception that if you are supporting a green or sustainable product, that there is a financial trade-off. I think you need to make sure that it's as good or better than conventional products and has that impact alongside it. And that's the point at which it becomes the no-brainer and the one that the majority of people would choose to adopt.
Yeah, I think that customer experience point is really important. And again, something that we've been aligned on was just zero compromise. If you want to have scale, you can't expect people to, especially with services, you shouldn't expect them to compromise on price or quality of experience. But then I think one other point around this sort of tension that's occurring, I think there is also just something, it's become very politicized, and in many ways, I think unnecessarily so too. A lot of it is around the language that you use. I think there was a really great statistic or a kind of a heat map that showed how people react to certain ESG language depending on how it's framed. So when you speak about energy independence in the US, for example, no one is against energy independence. The thought that the US is creating its own energy, that you can create your own energy from your own house. Everyone's like, rock and roll, awesome. And then as soon as you start speaking about, divesting from fossil fuels and renewable energies and so on and so forth, then you see a extremely politicized shift occurring there in terms of the red-blue dynamic. So I think a lot of this is also that's the media landscape too, I guess, on a broader picture. There's no nuance. It's very kind of red party versus blue party, not much cohesion. But really, I think if we just focus on language, who doesn't want not many people don't want to have a world where there's more equality of opportunity, where there's more green parks, where the air quality is better, where your children, might have a better life. These are things that are just fundamentally core to humans, and I don't think anyone really doesn't want that. But as soon as you start using language like ESG, then things get politicized, and I think that's maybe sometimes why our sector can also be to blame in some ways too. You should just make things more accessible to everyone, because sustainable finance has seemed to be the reserve of the experts and of the rich and of a particular political mentality. But I think that's one of the really awesome things about Shoal is just, hey, you can invest with £1. You don't worry about where your impact is going. Like, we take care of that for you. Don't need any expertise. Don't worry, it's still like a market leading rate. Don't worry, the user experience is good. That's where we should be getting.
Yeah. But I think one of the things we've seen that's been very interesting as we've tested Shoal with consumers is there's definitely an education piece there, in the sense that a really surprising number of people don't understand how banks make money and generate the return on the savings that they place with them. It's not an exaggeration to say that a great majority, I'd say about 75, 80% of the people we've spoken to about Shoal from the high street are under the impression that banks provide custody and nothing else. You give them your money, they put it in the vault, and somebody with a nightstick guards it. And as soon as you start to talk to them about supporting green and sustainable projects and companies, A, they assume they'll get a lower return, and B, they assume there's more risk involved than there is with their current account provider. Once you make that breakthrough, people are really enthused. And I think if we can get out to the mass market and just communicate that it is your money, it's your choice of bank, and you can have some insight into or control over how your returns are generated, that could be really, really popular. And it's strange to think that a concept as old and entrenched as savings could still be disrupted in such a significant way. But I do think it's true to say that even now, banks only really compete on rate. And if you can get that breakthrough where you also compete in terms of what the money is used for, you've got a really exciting race on your hands.
Yeah, well said. We could have this discussion for a lot longer, but I just want to touch on, just to close things out, tell me a little bit about what's next for Algebra, if we haven't covered it already. Are you focused on expanding your product set in the UK, or is it more about rolling out internationally? What's the roadmap in the next 6 months to 1 year?
Yeah, I can talk about maybe the longer term roadmap. But before we do that, maybe we kind of didn't properly introduce Shoal and say that, that'll be launched soon. So maybe, Tom, you want to give us an introduction to that?
Yeah. the sort of 1 minute version of what Shoal is today is a sustainable savings platform. Fixed term savings, strong rate of return, but while the money is on deposit, it sits with our partner bank, Standard Chartered, and is referenced exclusively against their sustainable finance portfolio. So that is things like renewable energy, clean water production, but also social goods. So we bracket it under community development, but schools, hospitals, libraries, things that aren't necessarily green in the traditional sense, but still undeniably of benefit to the community they serve. So what we've built is an app that lets people access that product. As Martin says, you only need £1 to begin saving. And it's not especially complicated. If you want it to be, it's a standard savings app. And then we've got the impact space for those who want to dig a bit deeper and find out what their money's supporting. But we've made it as accessible and as interesting and compelling, we hope, as a finance app can be.
Yeah, like your climate change denying uncle or whoever should also want to join. I think that's basically one of the metrics of success.
Yeah, exactly. Even if you don't care about the sustainable bit, the app experience and the rate of return should still be enough to bring people in.
Uncle for you. I'll send them your way. Well, that's great. Really exciting, and I love the areas on which you're focusing, and it's a really unique approach. Gentlemen, thanks for joining the show today. It was a great discussion, and we'll be watching Shoal and Algebra as you grow into the future of where these financial products are much needed. So thanks for being here today, and we'll see you again next time.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks for having us.